On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, this business will get out of control, and we'll be lucky to live through it. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano, and welcome to today's episode. To say that there is shit happening on the world's oceans is an understatement. I have been doing this channel now for almost 5 years, since Ever Given went sideways in the Suez. And I think the only time I've ever woken up more surprised when it came to shipping had to be the morning the Dolly hit the bridge in Baltimore. The amount of stuff that's happening right now is just nearly insane. We've had strikes against a container ship in the southern end of the Strait of Hormuz. We had what you just saw at the beginning there, a unmanned surface vessel strike against a bulker off the port of Fujairah. We had the U.S. Navy torpedo and sink an Iranian Corvette off the coast of Sri Lanka. And that's not enough. Plus what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz. That's not enough. The Ukrainians supposedly used an unmanned surface vessel to strike a Russian liquefied natural gas carrier in the Mediterranean. We're going to go over all of this, talk about what's going on in the Strait, and what do we see happening. Plus, the President of the United States dropped a note saying, hey, we'll insure all shipping and escort it. It's a lot. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so be alerted about new videos as they come out. So this is the post by President Trump yesterday over on Truth Social. Effective immediately, I've ordered the United States Development Finance Corporation to provide at a very reasonable price political risk insurance and guarantees for the financial security of all maritime trade, especially energy traveling through the Gulf. This will be available to all shipping lines. If necessary, the United States Navy will begin escorting tankers through the Strait of Hormuz as soon as possible. No matter what, the United States will ensure the free flow of energy to the world. The United States' economic and military might is the greatest on earth. More actions to come. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. And I will always say how polite President Trump is on every one of his Truth Social. All right, first I want to go over to marine traffic here and show you this animation they put out that shows you tanker traffic as of 27 February through 3 March. And you'll see up here the highlight section here of tankers going through the Strait of Hormuz. And then it shuts off. You just see a very few tankers going through. Now, this is via AIS, the automatic identification system that will be used by ships transmitting. Now, some ships are turning off their AIS. We had a ship run through it the other day. But this is key. Now, one of the things I want to highlight here is not just the traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, but look at this line of tankers coming from Asia. This really doesn't stop, and I think that's a key element here. Ships are piling up here on the southern side of the Strait of Hormuz, to the east of the Strait of Hormuz, outside the Persian Gulf. So you have two issues that are going on here simultaneously. The tankers in the Persian Gulf are loading. They are filling up with oil, natural gas, liquefied petroleum gas. Everything is being done, and the number of empty tankers in the Gulf is diminishing. In the meantime, the number of empty tankers outside the Gulf is increasing. And because of the nature of oil and liquefied natural gas and liquefied petroleum gas, you have got to keep that fuel and oil moving. If you stop, there's only so much shoreside storage areas for these commodities. If you stop it, that's going to cause a problem. The other issue is not on this chart, but off the coast of Singapore and Malaysia are a huge fleet of tankers that are fully loaded, waiting to sail to where the market is best for them. They are tapping into that pool right now, and it is beginning to diminish. We're going to have to reopen the strait. The strait has to open. There is no question about this. The strait has to be open. But this goes to the larger question, why is the strait closed in the first place, and is it even closed? And can the U.S. provide the insurance and the escorts to do it? We're going to break this all down for you right now. So let's talk about the escort issue first. Go back a year or two to the Red Sea. At the beginning of the Red Sea, when the Houthis started attacking ships in December of 2023, the United States Navy, in conjunction with the Royal Navy, put a series of destroyers into the Red Sea, the Bab el-Mandeb, cheers, and the Gulf of Aden. They basically set up a wall of ships, and this is when they were shooting down missiles and drones and everything. but they were not escorting through. But the U.S. Navy couldn't sustain that. About 5 destroyers were there. They were running through their weapons. It was a very difficult thing to do. And at no point did the U.S. Navy actually physically escort through the Red Sea. And as a matter of fact, the situation became so dire that U.S. ships stopped going through. Matter of fact, we saw no ships go through the Red Sea, the southern part, from January of 2024 to September of 2025. So over a year and 3/4, they didn't go through. Just recently, we saw ships return, but now they've pulled back out. You don't have that option with the Strait of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf. There's no going around. You've got to go through there. But the problem with escorts is this. The U.S. doesn't have the vessels there to do it. This is from Ian Ellis. He posts this over on X. This is the laydown of naval forces, U.S. naval forces, on the left there, the Mediterranean, and on the right there in the Persian Gulf Fifth Fleet area. So you have the Abraham Lincoln Strike Group that's in that area. But if you look down here at the bottom, you will see the number of Arleigh Burke-class destroyers. There are about 8 of them in and around the Fifth Fleet area and about 3 littoral combat ships that are geared toward minesweeping. This is nowhere near enough assets to escort what is estimated to be about 125 ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz daily. They just do not have the assets to do it. Plus, you have to provide protection along the 1,000-mile-long Persian Gulf. This is nearly impossible to do with the assets in place. The U.S. would have to surge a heck of a lot more destroyers over there, and it's got to be destroyers because we don't have frigates, because we have not been able to build a replacement frigate in the United States. Yes, we have littoral combat ships, but they cannot provide the air defense against drones and missiles probably, and we saw that during the Red Sea. So the idea of escorting sounds good. Now, you can escort smaller number of ships. For example, U.S. flag ships. There's only 5 in the Persian Gulf. Some will come in and out. You can do that for U.S. flagships, and it's one of the reasons I think, for example, France has announced that the Charles de Gaulle, their aircraft carrier, and their surface fleet is deploying from the Baltic down to this region. I think they're going to do exactly what the Marine Nationale did during Operation Aspides and escort their own ships, CMA CGM and other vessels, through the area. I think we're going to see the same thing there. So I mentioned about 120 ships going through the straits. Here you go. This is from Lloyd's List. It shows you how much trade has dropped off here because of the conflict. Now, there's a lot of debate about why this happens. I'm going to come back to that in a second. Within the strait, we have a lot of tankers. I mean, we're talking about a little bit less than 200 tankers that are stuck within the Persian Gulf right now. The majority of them are on the smaller side. Those are what are called MRs, or medium-range tankers. These are actually small chemical and kind of refined petroleum, what was sometimes called clean tankers. And then you have the Panamax tankers. These are the ones that can go through the Panama Canal. Aframax, and then Suezmax. These are the ones that can just fit through the Suez Canal. And then the very large crude carriers. These are the big honking oil tankers. These are over 150,000 tons, carry 1 million barrels of fuel. And you'll see there's almost 80 of them that are on the wrong side of the Strait of Hormuz right now. Now, all of that kind of plays into what we're seeing happening. So the U.S. is not in a position. As a matter of fact, on Monday, the U.S. Navy said they were not going to escort vessels. They had a meeting with industry, and they said, hey, we're not doing that. Tuesday, the president came out with his note. So again, a lot of things we hear is inconsistent messaging coming out of the administration. This story from Lloyd's List kind of summarizes all of this, but the big one that, again, they're talking about here is the Development Finance Corporation providing political risk insurance and guarantees. Now, according to Lloyd's, at least 3 Greek owners are actively discussing Suezmax fixtures, meaning they're booking ships into the Gulf, going through the straits, and talking about running it with their AIS switched off. We saw that the other day with several tankers that mysteriously turned off their AIS and appeared on the other side of the strait. Now, tanker transits through the straits have largely halted since March 1st, with about 8% of the VLCCs stuck in there. Now, this has led to meetings in London with what's called the Joint War Committee. Now, I'll have a link below for this. The Joint War Committee is made up of representatives of Lloyd's, the big insurer house, and other underwriters who determine basically where insurance goes. If you look right now, the rate to go through the Persian Gulf, through the Strait of Hormuz, was roughly about 0.15 to 0.25% of value to go through the strait. That's what you were paying above and beyond, and that was good for 7 days. Well, what we've seen happen is the insurers canceled this. So you get stories like this from Jonathan Sauls over at Reuters. London marine insurers are expanding the Gulf high-risk zone as the Mideast conflict escalates. So that Joint War Committee that met on Monday has determined that they're adding high-risk areas around Bahrain, Djibouti, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar. They're expanding out the danger area. Now, that danger area is going to require more money. The insurance rate is going to jump from 0.15, 0.25% to anywhere from 1 to 3%. 3% is going to be for US, UK, and Israeli vessels because they are viewed to be high targets. Not just US, UK, Israeli flagged, but US, UK, Israeli owned. And that is key. 3% is pretty high. We saw during the tanker war of the 1980s rates as high as 5 to 10%. And matter of fact, we saw 10% in February of 2022 when Russia invaded Ukraine and closed off the Ukrainian ports. The rate jumped to 10%. Now, one of the things that Ukraine did during the conflict, and they're still doing to this day, is insuring vessels coming into their ports. They are providing the war risk insurance. However, that is very small. The number of ships that go into Ukraine is a handful. It's not a lot. And more importantly, they're small and fairly cheap vessels. Ships that go into the Persian Gulf are not that. They are larger vessels, VLCCs. The cost for a VLCC can be $150 million. And when you start talking about 1% of $150 million, you're talking about $1.5 million. You start getting up into the 5% region, we're talking about a huge amount of money here. So President Trump is signing the DFC to ensure a massive amount of money. But it goes to the larger issue. Why did the ship stop sailing into the Persian Gulf? Because I have to tell you, it's not because the Iranians closed the straits. They did not close the straits. You can sail through the straits. It's not closed. The decision was made by the shipping companies. But why did the shipping companies make that decision? Well, to understand that, you have to understand marine insurance. Now, I don't want to go into a huge conversation about marine insurance because those of you who are driving your car right now will pass out and there'll be an accident because I'm talking about insurance, which is the most difficult topic to talk about because it is not that interesting. But this chart from the international P&I groups basically shows you how marine insurance works. So a couple of things to note here before we jump into this. Number one, the P&I clubs, not corporations, not businesses, they're clubs. They're made up of ship owners. The owners insure their vessels. The reason you have clubs is you pool your resources together, and there are 12 big ones that insure about 90% of the world's ships. You may remember me talking about this because a lot of ships that are in the dark fleet don't have this insurance, and it's a big issue. But they pool their money together. And what they do is you insure with a club. So, for example, you can insure with the Swedish club or the American club or Lloyd's or Score, all these different clubs that are out there, the 12 different ones. The club itself will insure your vessel to a certain level, and that's what you see here, about $10 million. And then the clubs pool their money together to provide the next layer of insurance, which is up to $100 million. So the 12 clubs pool their resources together and now can provide up to $100 million. But then they have what's called reinsurance. And reinsurance is insurance for the insurance companies. So you get up higher above 100 million, almost to about $1 billion through an insurance company called Hydra. Yes, that's right. We cannot think of a more evil name for this. My good buddy Bart, who's a pilot on Twitter, put this akin to like a company like this should be on an island in the middle of the ocean, with a volcano on it or something. Again, this is a Marvel villain here. So Hydra provides insurance up to about $1 billion, but then you have groups of insurance above that take you all the way up here to $3.25 billion. And you need that level of insurance, not just for the ship, but for the liability, because what happens if your ship something happens to it and you incur damage. For example, Dolly hitting the bridge going into Baltimore. Or coming out of Baltimore, excuse me. So that's the big thing. So to understand insurance, there's a couple of things I would point you to, because I think this is it. One is a tweet that was posted by my good friend John Conrad over at G Captain. He goes into extensive length. I'll have the link to it here so you can take a look at it. But the one I think that summarizes it best is by Jim Bianco. A complementary explanation for the sudden mass cancellation lies in underappreciated regulatory dynamics, Solvency II. This is the European Union's insurance capital framework. The regime was enacted in 2016 and it continues to operate. In plain terms, this is why I love what Jim wrote here. These rules mandate that insurers and reinsurers must at all times hold sufficient capital to withstand a once-in-200-year loss event. When conflict escalates in the Gulf, internal risk models immediately recalculated the probability of a catastrophic claims upward. This produced an instantaneous increase in the solvency capital requirement. So because of the potential threat of running 125 ships through the Strait of Hormuz and attacks by the Iranians, they realized, shoot, we may not have enough money in the pool to pay out for as many ships that will be damaged or sunk. Raising the additional capital required would have taken months of board approvals, investor negotiations, and regulatory filings. Standard reinsurance treaties, however, allow cancellation on as little as 7 days' notice. Confronted with this binary choice, the firm selected the faster option. The ship companies, which are in the clubs, decided, hey, we're going to cancel the war risk insurance because we can't afford it if something happens. And then we're going to renegotiate the higher rates. We're going to increase the solvency of the pool. We're going to put more money into this so that when we do run the Strait of Hormuz, if somebody gets swacked by the Iranians, there's money to pay out. That's what's happening. So is it the Iranians closing the Strait of Hormuz? Well, yes and no. It's the threat of the Iranians that are doing it, but it's the financial damage that could happen that is causing this happen. So what's happening now? You're going from 0.15 to 0.25% war risk insurance up to 1 to 3% war risk. So you're increasing that pool, and that's what's going on right now. And once those contracts are signed and negotiated, I think you're going to see the ships start moving again, probably by the end of this week. So that gets you the update in the Strait right there. Now, we've had issues. As I mentioned to you before, a small container ship south of the Strait of Hormuz was supposedly attacked and hit. There's a bulker off the coast of Fujairah that's outside the Straits, was hit. Potentially another one was hit. But then we have other things happening around the oceans, and man, the oceans are just turning into the wild, wild west out there. So here's a story from Reuters. Iranian warship sinks off Sri Lanka, bodies recovered at sea. So at a press conference this morning, Secretary of Defense/War Hegseth, along with Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Kane, posted this video. This shows you a view through a U.S. Navy periscope of the IRIS Dina. This is an Iranian Corvette that was off the coast of Sri Lanka. The ship had participated in some naval exercises. And what you're seeing here is an attack by probably a Mark 48 torpedo blowing the stern off the vessel. Now, this is the first time a U.S. Navy submarine has sunk a warship since World War II. This is not the first time a submarine has sunk a warship. We have instances of this throughout the period since World War II, probably most famously the HMS Conqueror sinking the ARA General Belgrano, the Argentine cruiser, the former USS Phoenix, during the Falklands War. But this, I will say one thing too, I expected a little bit more from that explosion. It blew the stern off. I expected it, you watch these videos all the time, they tend to get them underneath the vessel. Now that could be an intentional effort here by the U.S. warship to destroy the ship by blowing the stern off and minimizing damage or minimizing casualties. But I guarantee you that members of that crew have died, and there are casualties on board. I can also guarantee you, on board that U.S. Navy submarine, there is a ridiculous amount of high fives, chest thumping, and just a batch of male testosterone that's oozing out of that submarine right now. I 100% guarantee you that with submariners. This situation represents the targeting of the Iranian Navy. The U.S. has specifically targeted the Iranian Navy. They have attacked vessels including the Suleiman, the Iranian base ships, the Iranian drone carriers, Iranian submarines. They are removing the conventional Iranian naval threat. But as we've seen in the Red Sea with the Houthis and up in the Black Sea with the Ukrainians, you don't have to have a navy at all to threaten commercial shipping. And that is the issue out here. Yes, you're removing the conventional threat, but it's the unconventional, the asymmetric threat that still exists out there that is a problem. So I want to talk about the different sectors and how they're being affected commercially by this. So we already talked about the oil sector. 20% of crude oil, 20% of liquefied natural gas come out of this region. So that's going to be affected. Again, there's about 100 million barrels of oil afloat and stored on ships. So let's talk about this. Number one, Reuters story. Asia scrambles for liquefied natural gas as Qatar, or Qatar, I'm not sure exactly ever how to pronounce Qatar's name, output halted. India begins gas rationing. So the three biggest exporters of liquefied natural gas on the planet is the United States, Qatar, and Australia. If Qatar's cut off now, it can't get liquefied natural gas out, then you got to go somewhere else. And one of the things piling up outside the strait are liquefied natural gas carriers. Some are going to start heading to Australia because you need a quick turnaround, and that is the closest spot. Some are going to head to the United States, but that's a long voyage to be able to replenish that. That's going to involve prioritizing liquefied natural gas carriers, potentially going through the Panama Canal to get to Asia fast. This is all causing problems, and getting liquefied natural gas up into Europe, because guess what? You now have a threat in the Red Sea caused by the Houthis. We're seeing traffic dropping in the Bab el-Mandab and going through the Suez Canal. So the other issue we have with liquefied natural gas is the fourth major exporter of liquefied natural gas, and that is Russia. But then you get this story right here. Moscow alleges Ukrainian drone boat attack on LNG carrier Arctic Medegas. So the LNG carrier was rocked by an explosion around 4 a.m. on March 3rd, roughly 150 nautical miles southeast of Malta. And when I say rocked, I mean rocked. That is not an image of sunrise or sunset in the Mediterranean. That is the fireball that emerged from that vessel. And you can see the absolute tower of fire that's coming out. We have these photos that are provided that show you the burnt out hull, and most significantly, they show you the massive hole that is ripped out on the port side of this liquefied natural gas carrier. I mean, that is just incredible. I can't even talk about it. That's an entire tank side that is vented out. So a couple of things about liquefied natural gas carriers real quick. Everybody is talking about how these things, when they get hit, will go off like an atomic bomb. If you measure the amount of energy inside a liquefied natural gas carrier, yeah, you have the energy potential of an atomic bomb, but that's not how these things work. These ships carry natural gas by refrigerating them. There used to be two different systems. One with a large spherical ball system that used pressure. Those were extremely dangerous. But the system that's used now is refrigeration, massive refrigeration. You'll notice that this tank is not round spherical holds. Instead, what they do is they lower the temperature. They supercool the natural gas into a liquid state. The ship probably got hit by an unmanned surface craft. That explosion punched a hole in the side. And what you got was venting coming out. And that hole is so perfectly aligned with the hold, I almost think that either it was an explosion that did it, but that doesn't quite look like an explosion to me. I could be wrong about this, but I think it was the heat melting this area. I think what happened is the gas in that hold ignited, burned and burned and burned, and eventually just molten the steel and melted it down, so you get a perfect area. I mean, you can see that this is a hold. You've got a forward bulkhead here. You've got an aft bulkhead here. I can't tell you how incredible that is. I mean, it's just amazing imagery to see that. The crew got off. They abandoned, so the ship didn't explode into a huge ball of flames. So if you're planning to import Russian liquefied natural gas, I would think twice about that. That's going to be an issue. We've seen attacks, potential attacks on shipping in the Mediterranean by the Ukrainians. We had a drone dropping bombs on ships. We've had ships targeted by Ukrainians, and now this attack, this is definitely going to create a lot of instability in the LNG market. Meanwhile, we have this story from Bloomberg. Black Swan risks stock container carriers in avoiding the Iran war. So out in Long Beach, California, the TPM conference, Trans-Pacific Maritime Conference, is underway. At TPM, obviously, the topic has got to be about what's going on in the Persian Gulf. And Jeremy Nixon, the CEO of the Ocean Network Express, ONE, said Monday there were about 750 ships caught in the Strait of Hormuz. About 100 of them are container ships. And Nixon said all of that cargo is going to start backing up into the hubs and into the key locations in Europe and Asia. So Nixon said the immediate impact is pretty clear. Insurance companies have refused to cover vessels in the area and fuel costs are spiking. He said, quote, all of that cargo is going to start backing up into the hubs and into the key locations in Europe and Asia. It's another black swan event, and it's not just maritime freight facing problems. Key hubs for air cargo are also closed as operating scaled-back schedules. And we can see that here. Mediterranean shipping companies sent out this notice, the end of voyage declaration for shipments to the Arabian Gulf. We initially saw that some companies like Hauppauge were escalating their costs to ship to the area, but now we're having ocean carriers canceling, saying we're not sending our ships through at all into the Persian Gulf. This creates a myriad of problems. Number one, because you do get some big ships into this region. This is an area where the big ultra-large container vessels, some of them will stop in this area and offload down in Sri Lanka, over here off the coast of Oman, and some will go into the Persian Gulf, not a lot, but some. But you do have some traffic that goes in there. The problem with containers is it's like a game of musical chairs. Once you cause a backlog in one chair, it spills down the whole system. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. And this is why Nixon is making this point. And I think it's a good one to make. This is going to cause disruptions in it. Add to the fact that the ocean carriers were just getting ready to start sending more ships through the Red Sea. That's canceled now. Maersk says they're pulling back out. They're not going to go through. They were sending smaller ships through. They're not going through. CMA CGM says they're not going to send any ships through. They were under the escort of the Marine Nationale. They had a service, the Phoenician Express. They're pausing that right now. So this is going to cause disruptions into the container market. Another sector that was hit, one that you would never think of, the cruise ship sector. That's right, people take cruises into the Persian Gulf. This story from Cruise Industry News, MSC Cruise said it's cooperating with airline partners in the Middle East, particularly Emirates and Etihad Airways, to identify and secure return flights for its guests. According to MSC in a statement, we are requesting priority for our guests that are our partners. At present, airlines operating flights have indicated that they will follow an order of priority based on the original flight date. Well, I mean, obviously you've seen images of attacks on airports in and around the Gulf region. Specifically, what we're looking at here are 6 ships. So MSC Cruises has the MSC Urabia that was originally scheduled to depart from Doha. It remains docked in Dubai. TUI Cruises, which is a German shipping firm, their 2 ships, the Mein Schiff 4 is docked in Abu Dhabi. The Mein Schiff 5 is in Doha. Very innovative names for Mein Schiff vessels. And then Celestial Journey is docked in Doha until at least March 7th, while Celestial Discovery remains in Dubai. And then the Aurora Manara is docked in Dubai. And then lastly, I'll have a link here to you. Lloyd's has been doing a great job in updating the status of ports in the area. This is their Wednesday, March 4th report. The amount of stuff happening right now is just crazy. Again, it's not the Strait of Hormuz. We have a sinking off of Sri Lanka. We have an attack up in the Red Sea. Not even talking about what's going on in the Black Sea. Not talking about the fact that the Baltic is iced over right now and you can't get traffic out of the Baltic because it's so freaking cold up there. This is just absolutely incredible. And I will say this, that if I was not on spring break this week, there's no way I would be able to keep up with this because the amount of stuff happening is at a ridiculous rate. And that's why you need to tune in to what's going on with shipping. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? You hit the super thanks button down below or head on over to Patreon and become a monthly, yearly subscriber. Again, just a lot of stuff going on here, and I'm trying to stay afloat, much like many of the ships that have been attacked out there. Until the next episode, this is Sal, signing off.